He was kind of a midfield back who played like a loose forward a lot of the times with the touches of a winger. Do they have a plan for how they're going to use him? I love the way he presents himself. He's very articulate, so he's obviously a real thinker. And now he gets his opportunity. And it's great. Martin, that argument has ended. There is no discussion about that now.
But they change their rules every 5 minutes,
No,
Tony,
not over this.
DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
The All Blacks named yesterday 35 players, and there's a couple of players who are on standby because there's a couple of players who are injured. It's always a fantastic day, the naming of the first All Black squad of the year. Tony Johnson from Sky Sport is with us, and Tony, especially those 5 newbies who get named and the life-changing experience for them and their families that it is. We've got 6 quick questions to start with, then we'll deep dive into some of the issues around the squad. But before that, I just want to say congratulations to you, all of yours and everyone at Sky. Fantastic ratings for the Super Rugby final, best in almost a decade.
Yeah, best ratings for a grand final since 2016. Excellent. And the most watched sports event in New Zealand this year.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Superb.
Yeah.
Well, it was the occasion was brilliant, wasn't it? So,
yeah, and a great effort by the whole team. It's been a terrific Super Rugby Pacific season, Martin. It's been a lot of fun doing it, but a lot of hard work behind the scenes go into it.
Yep.
And so it's rapt to get a result like that.
6 quick questions for you. Is 5 loosies enough from Scott Robertson, given that every squad last year had at least 6 and a couple of squads had 7?
Yeah, probably not.
Is 2 first 5s enough?
Yes.
Does the Mo'unga issue need to be discussed again?
Not until he comes back to New Zealand.
Can we see a style of rugby that we might be playing with these names that have been named?
Possibly.
Is this the same squad that's going to be named to play South Africa? Obviously, there will be injuries that take...
Yeah, not necessarily, but mostly, yeah.
2 new midfielders, does that mean that we're looking for a new midfield combination?
No, not necessarily.
Is there anyone that you think is really unlucky that should have got in that missed out?
Quite a few players, probably.
All right, well, let's start straight away there then, Tone.
Okay, well, Emoni Narawa has been named as cover, and he'll be in the squad probably for the first test against France, if not beyond that. Given that they've only named 2 specialist wingers, I'd say he would be very much in the unlucky category. There's a couple of midfield players. David Havili, who's been part of the scene for a while, has played really well leading that Crusaders team. He misses out. There is a suggestion there might be a bit of an injury there, but even so, that was a tough one, that part of the selection, the midfield. You look at the loose forwards, you got a couple of guys who've been very much part of the scene in recent years. Ethan Blackadder, who played very well towards the end of Super Rugby. Look, the sort of guy you really like to have in your team, but they haven't got room for him, nor have they got room for Dalton Papali'i. In fact, both of those guys, when you look at it, with the fact that they named Christian Leo-Willie as a cover and also Peter Lakai as quite pointedly named as not being available because of injury, you'd say that those two have dropped down the pecking order. And there's a couple of props as well that were being talked about, particularly loose head props. Might have been a little bit unlucky. George Bauer, Josh Fusitua's had a very good season with the Blues, but they've gone for Ollie Norris. And then George Bell, who was seen as a bit of an investment player last year, he misses out to Brodie McAlister. Although, McAlister has played really well this year for the Chiefs, rugged, very experienced, accurate in everything he does. So I suppose those players could rightfully feel a little bit disappointed or unlucky that they haven't made the team. But some of those positions, there were real log jams, and so people were always going to be disappointed.
Scott Robertson's made a point as well as saying that as far as his loose forwards go, some of the locks can cover. Is this kind of a complete mind shift for him? And against, especially if we're playing against South Africa, it's a position, that loose forward trio, which is going to have to get exactly right given the tall timber that they have. You're
right what you say in that 5 compared to what they picked last year. That is light, and it could well be that Tupou, maybe Scott Barrett, or I think they went past that idea last year that he had been used as a blind side in the past, but I think they felt last year that no, his job is in the middle of that pack. But it could be that one of the locks at some stage has to deputise as a loose forward. It's a high attrition position. Mm-hmm. So to those guys that did miss out, I wouldn't be ringing your agent just yet, because I would say there'll be opportunities as the season wears on for those guys to come back in, because injuries hit loose forwards as much as any position on the field.
Kirifi obviously a standout player in Super Rugby, and everyone, every amateur All Black selector was wanting him to be in this. The thing I love about his story more than anything is his age. He's 28, and how many players have hung around that long? Because this day and age, there's, obviously there's other opportunities out there, and a lot of players will probably be thinking, by that age, have I reached the point of no return here? He brings one of the greatest stats, I think, to any All Black squad, that he's the most capped NPC player that was named yesterday. So that just goes to show the guy's commitment to wanting to get into this All Black.
Absolutely. And if you go back, say, the 60s and 70s, and they went on the long tours, and that's when you'd see a guy come in at that age, probably with a view to playing the midweek games, a few of the Saturday games, but not necessarily the test matches.
Yep.
This is a guy who's been picked for a test series, and no one, in terms of the effort that he has made to improve his game, to develop his game, to iron out the edges of his game, no one deserves it more than him. I love the way he presents himself. He's very articulate, so he's obviously a real thinker. And now he gets his opportunity, and it's great. And what is good to see, Martin, is that they have rewarded Super Rugby form.
Yeah.
Some of those players who missed out might argue with that.
Yeah, fair enough.
But the selection of him and also Tavatavanawai, which will be another very popular choice with the punters.
Well, he was the first name that probably came up after 2 or 3 rounds, Tony. And especially because he was doing things that normally you don't expect a guy in that position to do. And it's his ball-winning ability as much as anything else, which is why I suggested the thing is maybe there's a slight change coming in midfield.
It brings a different dynamic, that's for sure.
Nice,
and I did say to you in the past where I wondered where he was going to fit in because of the way he plays, because really he's played most of his rugby as a winger, but they've named him as a midfield back, where he was kind of a midfield back who played like a loose forward a lot of the times with the touches of a winger. So you bring that word hybrid into the equation. Do they have a plan for how they're going to use him? Yeah. That'll be interesting. I could see him on the bench, certainly for the game, the first game at Forsyth Bar Stadium, and imagine the response it would get if you brought him into the game off the bench. Just lift the roof off the place. So again, that's a nod to his form, and a remarkable transformation from a winger to a midfield back, where he's only really played for one season, and into the All Blacks. So, yeah, if you're going to talk at maybe a bit of innovation or maybe just mixing things up a bit, he could be the guy to do that. Having said that, I don't see him as a starter at this point. I think they will probably have a reasonably conservative selection around their 15 to run onto the field for the first one, maybe coming off the bench because they are light on wingers and he can cover both wing and the midfield.
The mention of Darry being injured and also Holland getting his first call-up says obviously that we're looking for some height, aren't we? We need someone to match those South African monsters.
Yeah, there's that, but he has also played outstandingly well this year in a team that was battling to get the wins on the board. His work rate is quite outstanding. The number of tackles that he makes for a start. I mean, locks have to make lots of tackles now because the way the game is played, you're taking a lot of traffic up the middle of the ground, so locks have to be there to stop it, and he has done that as well as any lock in Super Rugby this year. His ability to move bodies at the ruck, that's where the size comes in, because as a mate of mine who was an All Black lock who went to coaching said, if you're a lock and you can't move bodies, well, you're not going to make the team. So there's that. He's also very good with the ball in hand when he gets the opportunities, and obviously with his height and his line-out skills will continue to develop. This is an investment for the future, and the opportunity is there because Sam Darry, who would have been there had he been fit and hopefully will come back into the picture perhaps for the end of year tour, but he's not there at the moment. Josh Lord's had continuing injury problems. There's a clutch of other locks who are almost there but not quite. This is an investment for the future. He had his name, I think, inked in fairly early on in the piece. I think they've seen the potential in him from way back.
When you mentioned that you think it's going to be a conservative 15, so you can actually already see, do you think that the 15 that is going to play against France?
When I say conservative, I don't mean conservative in the way we're going to play the game or anything like that. It's just, I think for the first test, you want to get that first one. Guys, right? You want to get that win on the board. In the first game. The French, they won't have their strongest team on the field for that first game. Hopefully it will be boosted for the second and third. That remains to be seen. But you want to get a win on the board, first game of the season. So I think they will I'd be surprised if they strayed too far from what most of us will see.
Okay, that was my next question. So in terms of loose forwards, when we talk about Kirifi, could you see him starting against France, or do you think it's going to be Artie at 7, Satiti at 8, and then 6 remains to be seen? Maybe it's Finau at 6.
Yeah, well, you've taken one of the possibilities for 6 out of the equation, haven't you? Ethan Blackadder, who, as I say, I thought played terrifically well towards the end of the season. With him, it's been about staying healthy. Finau wasn't prominent in the final, but I think they like what he brings. He's big, he's strong, he's got aerial skills. His gain line stats were actually as good as, if not better than, just about any other forward in Super Rugby by the end of the competition. Yep. Bearing in mind that some players didn't get to play the last 2 or 3 weeks, but his gain line stats were outstanding. So to me, it's Artie at 7, Satiti at 8, and although he was in a moon boot the day after the final, but as I think we mentioned yesterday, you see that often. I don't think it's anything of great concern. And then maybe Finau at 6. And the interesting thing is, with Jacobson potentially not being available, then that opens up a place for either Christian Leo-Willie, who's kind of there as cover, or Kirifi to come off the bench. I'd like to see him come off the bench in that first test, definitely.
And then Artie could move back to 8 if they want
or whatever. And I think players being able to mix and match positions does seem to be something they've given a lot of thought to in the selection of this team, because there is quite a lot of versatility there.
So let's look at the outside backs. And again, it looks light in that there's only a few names, but I suppose what they're looking at again is that players are going to interchange positions. I mean, he even said yesterday, Scott Robertson, didn't he, that both Barrett and McKenzie can play on the wing if necessary. So for a start, who do you pick as our first choice wingers? Obviously, Jordan's at fullback. There's no question about that.
Yeah, well, it pretty much picks itself then, doesn't it? Jordan at fullback, and then Sevu Reece and Caleb Clark on the wings. At first glance, I agree with the initial comment about this team, was that it did look light on the outside, but they'll have given that thought. And you're right that if it's, say, for example, just say for argument's sake that Barrett starts and McKenzie comes off the bench, or vice versa, I'd expect to see both of those players on the field together, which would mean Jordan spending some time late in the game on the wing.
Yep.
Rieko Ioane, as we know, has always been a very good left winger.
And I would be surprised to see him move sort of into that position.
Who knows?
Yeah.
But other players, Geordie Barrett's played on the wing in test matches, as you say. So there is that interchangeability there. And look, you often see centres or wings. Anton Leonard-Brown's very good at it. You often see Billy Proctor doing it. They actually occupy the wide channel anyway. So movable parts, fluidity and versatility do seem to be something of a hallmark of this team, and will be a pointer to how players are going to be used.
Brodie McAlister is the name that everyone says, oh, there's your bolter. But as you said right at the very start of this, that Super Rugby form was rewarded. How much of a surprise any of these names to you?
Well, that was a surprise, I have to say, but he has played extremely well. You do feel for a guy like George Bell, who last year was kind of anointed as almost like a project player. We've picked this guy on his potential, and we're going to see him through. He got in ahead of a couple of other pretty good hookers, and I'm thinking of the likes of Ricky Riccatelli or Kurt Eklund, guys like that. So they marked him down as a player for the future, and now they've gone and left him out. But McAlister, he's very solidly built. He's technically very good. His line-out throwing, that's an important thing. Again, I think this is a reward for Super Rugby form, but also this is a guy that's taken a punt. And this, I've got to say one thing, just a little side issue with this selection. It might just put paid to rest about playing for the Crusaders being the default setting or the deciding factor in a toss-up between players, because Havili, Blackadder being left out, and of course Brodie McAlister, who left the Crusaders to go to the Chiefs. So I think we can put that argument to bed. But he took a punt on that. Moving away from a successful franchise to go to the Chiefs, and he's been rewarded for that. So I guess it was a surprise, but when you look at it, I think form's been rewarded. I suppose the other one in terms of the front row was the loose head prop situation, because there'd been a fair bit of talk around for Joshua Fusitua, who's had a really good season with the Blues. George Bauer, who's been there, and when he did come on for the Crusaders, played really well, but they've gone for Ollie Norris. I was asked by Rugby News probably about 6 weeks ago to project an All Black team, and I did have Ollie Norris in the team.
Good on you. There you go. Big tick for you.
Well, yeah, he was involved in a hell of a battle with Fletcher Newell in the final.
God, Newell was good, wasn't he?
And he got the early penalties, did Ollie Norris, but Newell got the top. But Newell's probably, to my mind, been the best tight head prop in Super Rugby.
He's playing for 80 minutes, Tony.
Yeah.
He plays
fantastic.
80. He plays the game.
Yeah, but that's a taste of things.
Yeah.
You know, it's always a battle at Test rugby, but I think what they like about him, he's a really big guy, Ollie Norris, and for a guy of his size, he moves really well. He's got good footwork. He's got good hands. They like him both sides of the ball, I think was the expression that they used. So reward for him. But again, that was a position that probably became vacant because of the injury to Ofa Tu'ungafasi. Timoci Williams now becomes that player who can play both sides of the scrum. So there was an opening for a loose head prop, and again, they've probably gone with Super Rugby form in picking Ollie Norris.
A couple to go. Who starts at first five? First test of the year.
Oh boy, that's a tough one. My theory is that if Geordie Barrett starts in the midfield, then Beauden starts, because then Geordie Barrett's your goal
Geordie's
kicker.
going to start at 12. I mean, I just think that's a given, isn't it? He's a vice captain of the team. They're not going to leave him out.
Yeah, and then Damian McKenzie coming off the bench, either to play, interchangeable parts with Barrett. If they don't start Geordie, then I would say McKenzie, probably because of his goal kicking. I know he missed a couple in the final.
And against Auckland, the Blues as well.
Yeah, but he's also his goal kicking. He was top point scorer.
I don't want to just point that out, but those are the kind of the margins of these games, aren't they? And he was pretty absent during the final. You know, he just didn't impose himself, or he wasn't a bigger part of the game as what they needed him to be. So,
yeah, probably the opportunities didn't open up for him. I don't think it's down to him that they didn't win the game.
No, of course not.
That would be a real stretch. Maybe wasn't able to influence the game to the extent people expect him to, because he does it so often. But it was a final. That sort of thing happens in finals. But yeah, it's a hard one. But I just wonder at the moment whether it might be Beauden. Barrett. He's mixed up his kicking game really well. It's a really tough one.
Oh, well, it's the one half doesn't
know, yeah.
So Mo'unga, look,
but this way, they're both in the 23. Yeah. Absolutely.
I started the show by saying, look, as far as Mo'unga goes, and I know the questions are about his eligibility and he's not playing here and all of those kind of things. In terms of us wanting to get back to being the best team in the world, my only question is, what have you got to lose by adding him? Todd Blackadder said last week he thinks he's a better player than he was when he left New Zealand. If he's fit and he's available, and I'm the All Black coach, I'm just sitting there going, well, why wouldn't I want to see him training?
Martin, that argument has ended. There is no discussion about that now, because the line's been drawn through it. There is a policy and they're going to stick with it, and I've always supported it.
But they change their rules every 5 minutes,
No,
Tony,
not over this. They obviously, the lines get a little bit blurred when it comes to players coming back from sabbaticals, but these are players who are committed to New Zealand rugby, and not players who've gone off overseas, signed contracts elsewhere, and don't have a contract with New Zealand rugby. There's a difference there. As I say, if I've got to be consistent, because I've always supported that if you want to play for the All Blacks, you have to play here.
In New Zealand.
I certainly thought it was a discussion worth having. I thought it was really worth looking at the possibility of bringing in like a ghetto law, something like that. The interesting thing is, you talk to the players who've stayed here in New Zealand, they don't want the law to change.
Of course not. No, because they've committed. Yeah.
So if we're going to see Richie Mo'unga back in the All Blacks, it will be when he finishes in Japan. And remember, he could have come back, but he decided to play one more season there. If he comes back, and if he is a better player than when he went away, then that is truly exciting. But it's no longer a discussion point, because the decision's been made.
All right, Edmund wins on that one. It's
not Edmund.
Edmund wins.
There are principles.
It's a policy.
There are principles at stake. There are
principles
at stake too. Martin. And you've got to think about the guys who've committed themselves to playing here.
I'm just a dumb old fan who wants the All Blacks to win, and if that guy's the best player in the position, I'm pragmatic enough to go put him in the bloody squad.
Okay, and next time there's a round of contracts, just turn off the lights, last one out.
Yeah,
that's
that's the other side of the argument.
That's why we have that rule, Martin.
Finally.
And that's why I support it, and that's why you're wrong.
Is this the team that is going to beat France from what we're looking at right now? 3 tests.
I would think so. You'd hope so. If especially we don't, as I say, we don't know how strong the French are going to be, but
they're going to be strong, Tony. I mean, they're going to be.
Yeah, of course they are. They're at the end of their season. We're on our turf. They've won series out here. They've won test matches out here in the past. So you absolutely you don't take them lightly. But look, there's a bit of fresh energy about this team. There's some good form about this team. Why wouldn't they hit the ground running? I think we can expect a good result out of the series. Look, let's not take anything for granted. Let's respect the French because they have tremendous depth because their
top 14,
lead now, their 14, top 14
it's the best in Europe.
It's the
no
well,
question, yeah.
if
in the
not
world.
Anywhere. Yeah. So, it won't be easy, but I really am confident that this is a team that can hit the ground running and get a good result in the series against France for sure.
This is the DSPN